Welcome back to the Global Financial Reset Surviving and Thriving the Transition. Joining me today is Jim Willie, U.S. Attorney, Benjamin Hart, and Bill Armour with Genesis Gold Capital. Josh Reed will be joining us next week. All right, one of the next events we may very well see unfold before the full disclosure and the emergency broadcast system will be the financial collapse. And this is yet another reason why both gold and silver are rising in value, real value. As the Fed lowers rates, finally, too little too late, Powell, as the Fed lowers rates, expect a potential catapult in the shiny metals. In fact, silver's up over 14% in the past 30 plus days. Gold is now shooting through the roof like we have been projecting really for quite some time. And gold will also play a major role in securing the US dollar again and perhaps in the new stable coin, digital currency, and the QFS that we perhaps are moving towards. Visit jmcgenesismetals.com and be sure to ask for Bill Armour, who will be joining us a bit later in this episode. Now, here's a disclaimer. I will say this in the beginning of every one of these episodes, and here it is. Listen up. I am not giving specific individual investment advice on this program. This is for educational purposes only. I bring aboard a variety of guests to the GFR. While many of my guests, and myself included, have done the research, as many of you have just as well, it is my belief that only President Trump and a handful of pertinent others in his circles know exactly what new system we are in fact moving into and just when and how this will all play out. One thing we do know for sure, for certain, is great change is now taking place in the battle of these parallel economies. Having said that, I encourage you to continue to do your own research and for sure follow President Donald J. Trump. Jim Willie needs no introduction, but Jim is the editor of Golden Jackass website and the Hat Trick Letter. Jim Willie has earned a PhD in statistics at Carnegie Mellon University in 1980. The Hat Trick, a newsletter that focuses on the US dollar, gold, currencies, the petrodollar, the economic decay in the West, the march towards fascism led by central banks and the medical sector. The newsletter has subscribers from over 75 countries. The global financial system is undergoing a transformation to digital infrastructure. While the economist profession has been exposed as degraded and compromised, the Jackass carries a near 90% correct forecast rate. So listen up, folks. Criminal forecast rate since systemic failure, criminal activity, and sustained pressures to maintain the broken system are integrated into their work. Please welcome first time aboard, first time me meeting, Jim Willie. Welcome, sir.
Well, it's good to be on and nice to meet you folks. I want to say that I am not an economist, but I do a lot of analysis of finance and economics. My training formally is with statistics, mathematical statistics, and I'm unencumbered by the limitations of economics credentials. That's a mouthful, which means I'm not badly educated like the Ivy League economists who are pure political hacks.
Well said, and a lot of.
I don't know where you want me to start, John.
I'd like to kick this off with a. Go ahead, continue, sir.
No, I could just make a couple of global comments.
Sure.
Gold and silver are on the run right now. They're breaking out. And it is quite clear to me that we have three things that are very important that are happening right now. The US government debt is now very clearly out of control. And it is, I think, 2 or 3 years into a default procedure. This is not going to be a one-day event. The second big event factor is that there's a global revolt against the dollar, and a lot of publicity is given to the BRICS nations, but this is bigger than just the BRICS, because we have all sovereign debt that is badly impaired, and I believe fraudulent, subject to contamination and counterfeit. JP Morgan, for instance, has probably printed $2 trillion worth of duplicate treasury bond from duplicate serial numbers. And the third factor is war. Donald Trump was elected on a platform of ending war, but it seems that in the Middle East there's an expansion of war. There's support of Gaza implicitly. And in Ukraine, if he's not shaking Putin's hands, he's slapping him in the face. There's been no attention given to Ukraine being the European center of trafficking of everything conceivable. I'm talking about amphetamines, narcotics, children, white women, human organs, bioweapons, and adrenochrome. Ukraine is the center of trafficking in all of Europe. And they love Bitcoin. The whole world is upside down right now, John. It's pretty clear. And gold and silver are reflecting that. We're in a transition. I believe we're in one of the largest and most comprehensive transitions, more than just modern history. I think in about a century, to the digital infrastructure of finance, which will eliminate fraud, but open the door in unusual ways to other types of fraud, like AI hacking. AI is both a benefit and a curse. We are now having very disobedient AI robots, and they're not programming ethics. They're programming goals. As a friend of mine said, Jim, watch this particular episode about AI. What the robot is saying is, F you, get out of the way, I want my points. That's a robot attitude. Get out of the way, F you, I want my points, I want to achieve my goal. We're not programming ethics, John, and it's going to get very, very interesting and dicey with AI, because in, what was it, late 1980s, early 1990s, we saw Terminator. Skynet concluded that the human race was a contamination. How long will it be before AI concludes that humans cannot make good goals? Okay, so there's a lot going on. I don't want to focus on AI. I want to focus on the finance, gold, silver. And I think at the center of the global infrastructure transition, I call it a paradigm shift. At the center is the bridge asset for transfers, XRP from Ripple Labs, Ripple Tech. It seems like XRP is being described without being identified by President Trump. I am in favor of three main investments: gold, silver, and XRP. Those who ignore the crypto world, the digital finance world, will be left behind, will be impoverished, or be run over like a truck.
Wow. Well, welcome to the GFR, and your topic lines there are hook, line, and sinker in what this show is all about. So music to my ears. It brought up a few comments and then some questions I'd like to ask of you, sir. Robots. I think of George Carlin. Garbage in, garbage out is the term he often used. And you have this scenario with the robots. You said they're programmed for goals and they're challenging human objectives and events. Well, that begs the question: who's programmed these things? But you're right. I don't want this program to be entirely on AI and all that stuff. But I agree with you completely. Even President Trump said way back, I recall him stating, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, that AI is very good and it can be very useful as long as it's in the hands of the right people. And he as president, will do the best of his ability to see that AI serves the people. But I have great concerns about AI. I don't know if you remember the late Cyrus A. Parsa. He did a lot of extensive research and work on AI, and I believe he was done away with. We'll leave it at that. But I want to move into this, Jim. You touched on it, but I've got a few granular points I'd like you to address. So
Sure.
We're engaged in this, what I call battle of, right? We've got the the Klaus Schwab's globalista reset versus President Trump's trajectory. These are competing systems: the debt-based fiat system, the SWIFT system itself, and the battle for currency supremacy, as you alluded to. So let's begin there from a 40,000-foot view. While you did touch on it quite nicely in the opening, break it down a little bit more. What do you see taking place? We've got this transformation in banking, a central bank digital currency. People lose control of their money. You've got the parallel systems and economy and the battle that the president is dealing with the Federal Reserve and the central bank system. What concerns do you have about this transition that you just mentioned a moment ago?
My major concern is that the King dollar is undergoing a sunset. And during the sunset, there is a revolt by the East. They're sometimes called the South. I don't know why BRICS is called the South. They're primarily China, India, and Africa. That's not the South. My concern is that the dollar is going to undergo its debt resolution, and it's going to contaminate the stablecoin ocean of liquidity. That's my major concern. If you look from 40,000 feet, you'll see that the East, mainly, the BRICS, under the BRICS umbrella, they're working toward a Chinese gold-backed digital currency, yuan. So the BRICS are going to focus on the yuan, but they're not just yuan. They want multipolar world. They're sick and tired of the Rothschild unipolar financial world. So the BRICS and the East are about multipolar, and I think we're going to have multiple gold prices before too long in like 7 different cities. And I'm very concerned right now that the stable coins for digital architectures are, without any obstruction, are accepting U.S. Treasury bills. I think it's going to lead to a contamination. And the Russian economic advisor to the Russian finance minister, a week or so ago, maybe 10 days ago, made a warning that the U.S. is planning to dump their treasury bonds into the stablecoin ocean of liquidity and do a downgrade at the cost of the entire global system rather than to the United States particular system. And I agree close to 100%. I have found something quite interesting about the Russians. You can't push them around. They've got strong leadership. They have women as wives, which is unusual. They are Christian, whereas the West has satanic leadership. And they fight pedophilia and child trafficking, whereas the West sponsors it, profits from it, and supports it. So the Russians are really quite interesting. They're actually being drained slowly in Ukraine. I don't want to get into a big Ukraine conversation, but their number of deaths in Ukraine war has exceeded Vietnam for our deaths.
Wow.
And NATO is just, oh gosh, it's so hard to avoid expletives and harsh words, but NATO is on just a suicidal, moronic mission where they believe the Atlanticist doctrine of conquering Russia and dividing it up into 7 parts. Nobody's done that yet. 7 or 5 attempts so far. And maybe Trump is trying to lead NATO into a self-depletion strategy. I tend to think that. But yeah. NATO is a place where the United States takes all of its obsolete weapons, send it to Ukraine, have them destroyed quickly, and then the U.S. military contractors get all their funding replaced from the destroyed weaponry. Okay, it's like a turnstile. I want to see Ukraine defeated, turned into a nub of a nation, and NATO dissolved from bankruptcy and exposure with their narcotics. We may
Well,
come
we've
to a
got the
day in the next few months. In the next few months, John, we may come to a day where NATO is isolated on its funding, and they can only operate on what is reported to be narcotics money laundering.
well, I think you're right on point with uh, President Trump. His strategies are always several steps ahead of whomever the opponent is, and depleting NATO certainly looks like that's on the docket. I want to step back. You mentioned about gold and silver. It's my understanding that Governor Ron DeSantis of the state of Florida has put a law or a motion forward of sorts to legalize silver and gold as legal tender in Florida. Have you heard anything about that? And do you see that as a trend that'll be taking place throughout state by state, let's say? And if so, which states do you think might come aboard?
Well, I actually think Texas has led that parade, that initiative with Governor Abbott. Um, that has already been signed into law with the Texas State Assembly, the legislature. I believe that Florida is right behind in that same movement. Florida is a little bit farther ahead in outlawing or making it impossible for a vaccine requirement mandate within a job description, a job requirement. I like what's happening in Florida. I don't fully trust DeSantis. DeSantis had to be, how shall I say, 2 years ago, he had to be scolded. He had to be cajoled. He had to be slapped around a little bit and told that he would back out of the race for Republican presidency and allow Trump to go unopposed. And if he did not, he would be politically ruined from lack of support. DeSantis is kind of a convert to the Patriot movement and not a long-standing member, in my opinion. There's some very questionable things that are happening in Florida, and I'm not really too expert in that. I've got a couple friends who are, and they're quite upset about a few things, like, say, compensation for people who were forced out of their jobs for refusing the vaccine. I know someone in particular who's under financial strain because he couldn't maintain a certain job, a high-paying engineering type job. And Pamela Bondi did absolutely nothing in Florida as their attorney general to help them out. So I don't fully trust Bondi, but I like what she's doing. I don't fully trust DeSantis, but I like what he's doing. Florida is a wonderful state, but Texas is so far ahead in a number of different respects.
Well, thanks, Jim. And it's interesting. I actually have the same views on Pam Bondi. I lived in Florida on and off for 25 years and was there when she became the Attorney General. I had an organization called the Save America Foundation at the time, and we tried to work with her to no avail. But anyway, I agree on DeSantis. The move that was made some years ago was political suicide. Going up against Trump would have been the end of his career. But by and large, and to Pam Bondi as currently posted as the Attorney General for the country, I trust Trump. And so if Pam Bondi is there, she's there for a reason. And I do think justice is coming very, very, very soon in a very big way.
It's like their outer targets, like an archery target. The outer target is what Robert Kennedy and Bondi are pursuing, and they're leaving the inner target alone. Clearly, Trump is working an agenda with agreements from the highest powers in opposition, which is Rockefeller. Rockefeller is not just oil. Rockefeller is the American Medical Association. Rockefeller is Big Pharma. And Big Pharma has branched into food processing plants and vitamin supplements. So we got toxic food complements of I call them Rocky Fella, kind of like Goodfellas, the movie Goodfellas with Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta. Rocky Fellas, because
what about me
people.
Is so funny? What about me do you think is so funny? Sorry, sir. You raised some great points there.
And by the way, Ray Liotta is a vaccine victim. Ray Liotta, the actor, is a vaccine death.
Is he really?
And Jamie Foxx.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and Jamie Foxx is another, and Franco Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers is another, and Hank Aaron, the home run king, he's another. They're all
Hmm.
vaccine victims. They're all Franco Harris. I'm from Pittsburgh. I went to graduate school in Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and Franco Harris was part of the 5 Super Bowl victories for the Steelers, and I was there during that whole time. I was in graduate school during that whole time. I had a long graduate school career because I was kind of a rebellious college kid. I was young. I went to college age 17, and I didn't want to major in my best area, which was mathematics. So I majored in computer science, and as a result, I spent a couple of years before I entered the master's program at Carnegie Mellon in statistics, which requires really, really strong mathematics. Some people think a statistician just cranks out, what's the average on that? What's your standard deviation? Okay, no. It's mathematical. There's Laplace transforms. It's 3D calculus. It's very difficult mathematics, and I love it. When I get stressed out, John, I read a math book. How strange is that?
Wow. That is strange. Well, that would put me to sleep very quickly. Jim, I want to move on to something that I know you have comments, opinions about, and perhaps provide some facts. It seems to me, as you observe moves the president has made, even back some years ago, the first step, and certainly comments he's been making on social media, as well as Dan Scavino, it seems to me that step by step, what we see taking place behind the proverbial curtain, if you will, is the IRS and the Federal Reserve. Do you see this being slowly but surely dismantled? Do you see that this will what will replace these functions that the Federal Reserve and the IRS, both unconstitutional, and one might go as far as saying criminal organizations? Certainly, 1913 was the Great American Coup. I see the president
Yeah.
dismantling these incrementally. What do you see taking place? And what replaces this? How do we function without these institutions?
These two areas are some of the most thorny, controversial, and difficult, murky topics to comment upon. But I'll only scratch the surface, John. This is very difficult, and I need 40 minutes to do a really good job. The Federal Reserve began a dismantlement about 2021. They ended their contract, and they functioned without a contract. And I believe that the Warburgs and all of their ilk were retired about 3 years ago. And Wall Street now owns the Federal Reserve with a share status. JP Morgan has the largest share at 35%. So Wall Street calls the Fed policy. And Wall Street made some sort of a compromise. I don't know the full details because BlackRock and Wall Street were at odds 3 years ago. But Wall Street, which controls the Fed, hired a BlackRock agent and analyst named Jerome Powell. And that surprised a lot of people in my little circle because Wall Street and BlackRock are not good friends. So now I believe Wall Street is controlling Fed monetary policy while at the same time soliciting opinions from BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, which combine to control somewhere close to $30 trillion in assets. So they can't ignore those big three. And those big three were very much responsible for vaccine mandates across the U.S. economy 4 years ago. I believe the Fed is going to be replaced with a very slow transition to a market-driven structure. By that I mean no mandated, no decision-making, or much less in the way of interest rates and, buybacks of bonds, the quantitative easing. That's such an insidious practice. There's no free market with the cost and price of money, none at all. But it is changing. I believe in the next 2 years, we're going to see the financial structure undergo large changes in favor of digital architecture, digital infrastructure, and the Wall Street banks are going to be forced to take an equal seat at the table, and they're not going to like it. So we have some very big transitions going on. Now, the Irene Rape Service is a different story altogether. I don't even like using their initials. I don't like using the cocaine importing agency's initials either. But I believe the Irene Rape Service is largely defunct, is gutless, toothless. And let me just say that in the course of my 800 consults that I've done in 5.5 years, over 5.5 years now, 800, I have had 4 different clients talk to me about their friend or their partner or their ex-wife or somebody else that they knew directly in the tax court. And every single time in 4 different states, in 4 different months, the judge said the exact same words. The IRS has no tax collection or police authority any longer. What I found remarkable was that the words were exact, the same, exactly the same. 4 states, 4 cases. One was an estate resolution, one was a divorce, one was a business partnership split, and I don't remember the 4th. 4 states, 4 months, 4 cases, and the judge said exactly the same words. So I believe I had one client made a rather remarkable accusation. He said, Jim, I got word that Citigroup is pretending to be the Internal Revenue Service right now. I said, stolen stationery? And he said, the works. So
Wow.
I know that they continue to operate. I know they continue to pressure for tax payments, but
Yes.
I'd rather not talk further about Irene. I'd rather not discuss
Okay.
Irene any further. I don't mind at all talking about the Fed. The Fed is in the middle of a global Western war. That's hard to describe. A war between the U.S. financial system participants, the U.S. financial titans, and the European. There's a war
So let
going
me
on.
ask this question. Yeah, Jim, let me ask back on the Fed. We'll leave Irene out of the equation. You stated quite a bit there, and I appreciate it. The Federal Reserve, it seems to me, and I'd like you to comment on, as it gets transformed, as you said, it's a slow process, and you talked about Wall Street involved. Isn't the Treasury Department going to be taking on the lion's share of what the Federal Reserve did? The Federal Reserve being more of a private entity that hijacked the issuing of our currency, and the Treasury, of course, is the government of which we vote in. So, do you comment on the Treasury's role if you see
Sure.
that
Sure.
moving forward, and
But-
the tariffs? The External Revenue Service seems to be a wonderful. In part replacement of the income coming into the United States, never mind the trillions pledged by foreign nations over some years, and of course our own exploration and development here at home. President Trump has he stated it almost verbatim, I don't think we need a federal income tax, the president is putting on record. Dan Scavino, his social media director, among other things, has been publishing things like abolish the IRS. Whoops, I forgot about Irene. But back to the Fed. Talk about the Treasury's role. How does it all end up at the end of the day, if and when the Fed is gone? And I'll say this one last thing. Our good friends G. Edward Griffin and Ron Paul are doing cartwheels in their living room right now with what they see taking place with the exposure of the Federal Reserve finally. But the Treasury, I'm looking for some commentary on the Treasury's role.
Okay. J.P. Morgan runs the Department of Treasury. Bessent was approved only because J.P. Morgan and Jamie Dimon said, okay, we'll approve of that. At the same time, J.P. Morgan is the largest shareholder at 35% of the Federal Reserve. So JP Morgan is running the Federal Reserve. JP Morgan is running the Treasury Department, and their agent in charge is Treasury Secretary Bessent. So that's not loaded with conflict. JP Morgan is running them both. I believe we're going to see more free market decisions with monetary policy, and I'm not exactly sure how the digital infrastructure is going to play a role in that, but I do expect the Wall Street banks to be forced into equal seats at the financial table for the next 2 years. They're going to do a lot of clever things, John. They're going to try to foment crises in order to grab more power, like with the newly emerging altcoins, alternative coins in the crypto land and digital finance. Let me make a comment about tariffs because I don't like them. I think they're predatory. I have long thought that with a tariff, there are two losers. It's a lose-lose. Look what happened with SoftBank back in March. Back in April, they were talking about $100 billion investment in the United States with robotics and data centers and power grid, power plants, electric power plants. And Trump went willy-nilly, and I think like a fool, imposed tariffs on Japan, and SoftBank has halted their $100 billion investment in the United States for robotics and data centers. Okay, so what you have now is there's something called a current account deficit, which is the trade deficit plus the investment deficit. Right now, we've got an investment surplus from tariffs, and the current account deficit is offsetting the trade deficit so that the current account deficit is getting much smaller. And Trump is taking that fact and the, let's say, semi-strong stock market, high level for the stock indexes, to say that we got one of the strongest economies in the last century when we're stuck in an economic depression. Donald, wake up! We're stuck in an economic depression. Inflation is reducing. Layoffs are huge. They're blaming it on AI, but it's not just AI. We have bankruptcies that are at a high level. We have mortgage defaults that are at a high level. We have unemployment that is a high level. And we have tariffs that are obscuring our economic depression that has been going on for 5 full years. Tariffs obscure.
Could it be
economic depression.
Understood. Could it be that there perhaps is a deeply seated plan that's not necessarily been disclosed that will allow the system to collapse so that we can cleanse out much of this debt, which really is fraudulent and not we the people's debt, that 37 trillion. Could it be that this is part of a more again obscure plan to flush out the old and bring in the new to keep it simple? That's a quick question. Then yes.
Will it be done at the expense of the rest of the globe? I mean, much of our debt, Jack Ma, as much as the Chinese magnates are weird and troublesome, Jack Ma of Alibaba said, you got 20 trillion out of your deficit that is for military spending. And you've avoided your infrastructure. And with your military spending, you've alienated pretty much every nation on earth, including your allies. We've alienated Japan. We've alienated Germany. We're alienating all Western Europe now. We're alienating Russia. We alienated the Middle East. Every nation, every monarchy in the Middle East. We alienated Iran. We're alienating Africa. We stole Chad's gold in order to pay back Germany. What have we gotten with 20 trillion out of the 37? Jack Ma put it very well. We've ignored our infrastructure, and with military spending, we've made adversaries. Okay, we can't ask the world, which have been victimized by our military attitude, to pay for our deficit and our debt and expunge it. What they're going to try to do, John, I believe they're going to try to bring about a monstrous gain in certain altcoins and Bitcoin. I mean, enormous gains. Maybe in the next 2 years, Bitcoin to 500,000, but that's only a fourfold gain. But they might be loading up on XRP for a hundredfold gain. There's an accumulation phase going on right now with Ripple's XRP. It's having tremendous accumulation by majors. I believe a few Wall Street banks like Bank of New York Mellon, Bank of America, I think BlackRock, they admitted to having a non-disclosure agreement, which meant that they're actively involved with XRP. So there might be some kind of a crypto digital finance plan to take enormous advantage of gigantic market cap jumps and pay down the debt. But I got to mention something because I've got 3 military sources, and they're very different. Some are verbal, some are email. One is like a medical Navy. And what I've been hearing is that Team Trump and the White Alliance have 200,000 tons of gold. Whether they bring that to the to the tarmac, you don't bring that to the table. You don't bring 200,000 tons of gold to any table. You bring it to an airport tarmac. They could pay down the debt with gold, but there could be some kind of a gigantic reset. It could involve Philippine gold with 1 million tons. They got 1.3 million tons in the Philippines. Team Trump has won, John. They have won pretty much every gold war in the last 10 years. And your confirmation of that fact is the death of Henry Kissinger.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. During this transition with these landmines and pitfalls and some of the things you alluded to, as well as the great successes that the president has done with regards to gold, the Dow is at all-time highs, 47,000. Do you believe there will be a correction in stocks, bonds, and real estate? And if so, by what percentage and when?
Well, you like to ask these really tough questions to be answered quickly in a short term. Commercial real estate is already down 50% in the last 3 or 4 years. Commercial real estate. The banks have used predatory practices to try to grab titles. The phrase is take the keys. They took the keys by denying a mortgage rollover. Okay, so commercial real estate has already been hit. The residential real estate market, everybody's asking, when is it going to come down? And I say, where have you been the last 2 years? It's already come down. I have people in Texas. I have friends in Georgia. They've done 20, 30% reductions in their prices and they have no offers. Okay, that's real estate. Okay, stock market. What's kept the stock market up? Well, if you print money and you send it through JP Morgan and the Wall Street Titans, you can buy stocks and keep them going. And if you move narcotic money laundering from Switzerland and Langley into the FANGMAT stocks, you can keep the NASDAQ very high levels. Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, Hyphen, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla. Money laundering. Billions. How did Tesla achieve its market cap? How did Netflix achieve its market cap? They don't do jack. I understand
Hasn't Netflix just suffered a significant loss as a result of their programming and some vocal hits from Elon Musk? I'm not saying Netflix is out of business, but I think they've just recently suffered a blow.
Well, unless they go down 90% in market cap, I yawn. Did they go down 90% in market cap? What justified their tenfold gain in market cap? That's got to come down. Okay, Apple and Amazon, I understand that. Microsoft, I understand that. Google, I understand that. But what most Americans don't understand is that the Swiss National Bank, which is their central bank, admitted about 8 or 10 years ago, we've got $2 trillion in the U.S. stock market, and our biggest holding is Apple Computer. And I dug into it. It's money laundering. It's Ukraine, money laundering. I made a forecast in 2023 when the Russians overwhelmed a Bitcoin Ukrainian underground data facility, and they smashed and they started liquidating Bitcoin. It went down from something like 75,000 to 55,000. JP Morgan said Bitcoin's going to zero. I said, therefore, that's the bottom. That's the bottom. If JP Morgan thinks it's going to go down to zero, that's the bottom. And you know what, John? It was the bottom. But I made a forecast, and it was a bold forecast. I did some research. I checked it with some clients who are, more informed than I am about European banks. And I made a forecast right at the moment in February of 23, when the Russians smashed the Bitcoin factory. I said, Credit Suisse is going to suffer a financial failure. Give it 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
It was 2. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correctamundo.
So
Why?
Okay, so you're on the record here.
They lost their money laundering. Money laundering is going into the NASDAQ stocks. People need to wake up.
Yeah. People need to get out of the system. Let me ask you this question, Jim. So we're clear on real estate, significant drop already in commercial, significant drop taking place presently and continuing in the private real estate. Where do you see stocks and bonds? And I know they're separate entities, but yeah, let's get your views and analysis on that.
Okay, the stock market will go down if the Wall Street finds it advantageous for the stock market to go down.
Okay.
They've got funny money coming into it. They get to the stock. This is not simple. They got funny money going into stocks. They got money laundering going into the NASDAQ. All the FANG mats are in NASDAQ. There are no FANG mat stocks in the New York Stock Exchange. They're not in the Standard & Poor's 500. Okay. If the Wall Street crew decides they need a financial crisis in order to grab more control, impose their policy, like with digital ID and CBDC, central bank digital currencies, they will bring about a crisis in the stock market, and it'll be easy, like taking candy from a baby, if they find it's to their advantage. Trump has said, I want this transition to QFS, quantum financial system, and the digital architecture. I want it to be seamless. And he's talked about converting U.S. government debt, namely the treasury bonds and bills, into equity, which I think is a very interesting idea. But the problem is, if say a Norwegian central bank holding of many, many treasury bonds, what if they're given some real garbage U.S.-based equity and they don't want it? Okay, can they say no? Will the Team Trump dedicate garbage equity for foreign bond holders? Okay, there's a lot of tough questions. The bond market, that's different. We should have a 10 to 15% interest rate right now based on our credit worthiness, based on our deficits, which are growing at 1 trillion every 100 days.
Wow.
Did we not see Greece go over 10% in 2011? Greece? Why? Because they had a lot of debt and they had a weak economy. The United States exported its industry. We've not brought it back. So why are we not at 15% interest rates? Instead, Trump tried to strong arm Powell into reducing interest rates to bring about a bond market rally so that the Wall Street banks can reduce their underwater bond holdings on their balance sheet. Well, we're getting a little bit of it. I forecasted a year ago, John, that the Fed would cut rates and the long bond would go up in yield. And we got that. That was not from my colleagues. That was my own. I thought, wrong move. The bond market will recognize it, and the open market bond market will send the TNX, the 10-year bond, up in yield, and that's exactly what we got. Okay, so the world is saying to Trump, why on earth would you want to lower interest rates when you're facing a debt default? And there's no good answer to that. The only answer is, well, we need a bond rally to help out the banks. That's not a market decision. That's a bully decision. So I don't know that we're going to get a bond market crash. I think we're going to see difficulties in the bond market. We've got lousy bond market auctions with the Treasury. We got something that's really a bad measure called the tail, which is the initial bond yield and the difference between the resulting end of the bond auction yield. And if it moves up, 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 that's called a big tail, and that's not good. It means an unsuccessful bond auction. We're handing money under the table with dollar swaps to our friends, so they are buying, and we call that good foreign participation. Okay, the BRICS are dumping treasuries, and we're abusing USD Tether, the stablecoin dollar. We're abusing it. The BRICS nations are dumping on an accelerated basis. We're abusing Tether and backing up with abuse to Bitcoin. When Tether is expanding, Bitcoin expands. So Bitcoin is making new highs. I reason the Tether is increasing in volume because of an increased amount of BRICS dumping of treasuries. This is a very complex, multi-sided fortress that's breaking. The digital architecture is going to take over. And I hope the stable coins can avoid the treasury bond contamination, but I really don't see how that will happen.
Wow. Well, this is quite the transition. You mentioned the central bank a moment ago. I want to talk about that briefly. Central bank digital currency is apparently being ushered into the central banking system, and there are great concerns of a Chinese style social credit scoring, basically controls over one's life and money. Very, very dangerous. Changes are taking place all over the world. A couple of things I'm throwing out the wall here to get you to comment on. That would be one. The second is Vietnam. 86 million accounts were closed in recent weeks by the government because the Vietnamese refused to comply with biometric verification. So then you got the stable coin, which we've been talking about, and the QFS seems to be the direction that President Trump's administration is moving us towards. There'll be no need for a SWIFT system for transferring funds. With all that change that is underway, what concerns, if any, well, I think you have concerns over this transition, but comment on the central bank digital currency. It's my understanding that those of us that are in the central bank's system, many of us, most of us, with our accounts on deposit, that the banks themselves can just trigger the click of a switch, if you will, the deposits out of dollars into a central bank digital currency, and thus draconian controls over it. Would you concur to that and care to comment on that? And what's your view of what happened in Vietnam and what's spreading around during this transition? It's quite dangerous.
You ask really tough questions, John, and I don't mind. I just need 40 minutes for each one.
We'll have you back. We will have you back, sir. But go ahead. Thank you.
I'll try. All the other nations of the globe have legitimate central bank digital currencies. I mean, like United Arab Emirates, the Russians. I leave out China for now. They're an exception. You've got a lot of nations, European nations, that are developing central bank digital currencies. The United States is unique because we don't want a central bank digital currency. Donald Trump has promised no CBDC. We've got legislation against CBDC. And where we are probably heading is into a multifaceted stablecoin environment that I call an ocean of liquidity. I don't think the United States is going to get the CBDC. I don't want it. I don't see it happening. I'm concerned about a backdoor where there might be some kind of a uniformly adopted crypto asset that is secretly rooted in a central bank digital currency. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned.
Okay.
I don't think the United States will have a CBDC. In fact, I don't think foreign nations will honor a U.S. CBDC. I don't think the United States is going to get the Chinese credit scoring system. BRICS rejected it. If the BRICS reject the Chinese, okay, there was a meeting, I think it was 2024. It was in Durban, South Africa. I don't know if you remember the BRICS conference in South Africa last year. It was a very important conference because on the final day, they were to have the Chinese finance minister or what do you call it, Premier Xi, but whoever it was to make the speech, it was to encourage the BRICS nations to follow the Chinese on their credit scoring banking system. And what they did, they had the South African police arrest the entire Chinese delegation and sequester them in a hotel lobby. So there was no speech. In other words, BRICS rejects the Chinese banking policy, and what they want is a common policy on transfers, a common policy on, say, trade payment, a common policy to avoid the dollar, and a common policy to be multipolar. But not that stupid ass Chinese credit scoring, which dictated Shanghai banking policy that resulted in 100 suicides and people jumping off high-rise balconies. And by the way, those white uniformed police in Shanghai, they were all robots. Shanghai, wow. 2 years ago. Okay, there's a lot going on. If BRICS does not adopt the Chinese banking credit score system, the United States certainly will not. Trump has promised not. Eric Trump is repeating that they're not. And by the way, I got something to say about Eric Trump. He says a lot of smart things about crypto. He's a little bit too emphasized in Bitcoin. And how come Eric Trump doesn't look even remotely like Donald Trump? Not remotely like Donald Trump. Who's your daddy, Eric? All right. There's a lot going on.
That's a conversation for another day on Eric.
Another day.
On that
right.
line. Yeah.
Canada is our test zone for pure fascism with the hand of communists behind it. Vietnam and Thailand are the test grounds for the new fascist banking programs, which are essentially an expansion of the Chinese system. Okay, they can talk about biometrics and facial recognition and thumbprint and maybe even voice down the road. What you're really talking about is Chinese strictures. And I think it's going to be reversed. Vietnam is remarkably not independent, but resistant and stubborn. They suffered a war with the United States, and they did not lose. They just got wrecked. The last shall be first. It will apply to Vietnam, and it'll apply to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is going to be a major African powerhouse. They've already got digital gold. They've already got, a gold-backed currency. They've got tremendous resources. They got gold, they got diamonds. Zimbabwe is going to be a lending center because they're going to have more wealth than they have population and economic development. Okay, there's a lot going on. It's all exciting. And I encourage people to go to golden-jackass.com and sign up for the newsletter. I finished 21 years in April, John. So I'm becoming
congratulations.
A veteran / fossil. I'm still very energetic. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I have only been drunk like 6 times in my whole life. I eat well. I rest well. In the war zone, I rest well. I'm amazed I'm able to sleep as well as I do. But, being my age, there's the 3 a.m. bathroom call or 2 a.m. I go to sleep early. That I'm going to try a certain exercise that I just learned about. We'll see how that works out. There's a tremendous amount going on. I do not like the tariffs. I do not expect a CBDC. I do not expect the gold and silver market to have any big corrections because they're facing U.S. government debt default. They're facing a global revolt against the king dollar and global war. We got a new, what do you call it, a war front, a new one, Venezuela. And that's close to home. By the way, military source told me Trump and Putin made an agreement. Trump will not do a land invasion of Venezuela. Will only beat the living daylights out of them in the ocean, destroying every single thing that floats.
He's begun doing that, and he's going after the cartels. Jim, I want to introduce you to someone. I know your time is short, and I thank you very much, and I'd love to have you back on this program a bit down the line. We had a scheduled guest who had technical difficulties, attorney Benjamin Hart, U.S. Citizen, naturalized Thai citizen. He may be on next week. And I really wanted him to chat with you a bit about what's going on in Asia, and you touched on some of that. But I'd like to bring on Bill Armour, right? Before I bring on Bill, last question direct to you, Jim, is where do you see the opportunities for investors with all this great change? Some we know we can put our fingers and hands on, some are speculative, but nonetheless, gargantuan, global, and uncharted territories, vastly changing systems and wars within. Having said that, where do you see the opportunities for investors right now and perhaps during Trump's administration? Where are the opportunities
without using debt
to thrive?
Without using debt.
Okay.
No debt, no margin. Gold, silver, and XRP.
All right.
Gold, silver, and XRP.
Excellent.
There'll be
XRP,
some really good opportunities. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Gold, silver, and XRP. We got it. Thank you. XRP, the crypto world, just want to close out with that. We'll bring Bill on. I've heard lots from different guests from different walks of life, all respectable folks like yourself, difference of views. Some say XRP is going to go to 100 and far higher than that, and state reasons to support that notion. And others say maybe $20 and then we're kind of finished. While no one has a crystal ball and there could be surprises down the line, from where you sit today with your extensive experience and research, where do you see XRP going over the next year to 3 years, and why?
20, 30, and then much higher. Those people who see 20 and 30 probably could not tell me more than 2 or 3 particular points about their intellectual property. I find tremendous ignorance in those who say that there's a limit of 20 or 30. Have they ever heard about on-demand liquidity and their intellectual property? Have they heard about 40 central banks that are integrated with Ripple? Have they heard about agreements or current usage with SWIFT? Have they heard about the 400 banks that have adopted the Ripple ecosystem? So people who say 20 or 30, I regard as some of the most ignorant in the financial sector. Ignorant.
All right. Well, thank
you. Without capability of talking about what their actual intellectual property is. I believe that it's probably it's designed to be at 100. And I believe it's being stress tested at much higher levels. Donald Trump describes XRP without using the name XRP. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know what it means transfer Ripple, XRP. I laugh at the ignoramuses who don't comprehend, don't study, don't understand their intellectual property, don't read about their adoption, don't understand and comprehend and even hear about Bank of New York Mellon, about Bank of America, about BlackRock, and all their internal development and partnerships with Ripple. They don't know anything about it, and they maintain an opinion. I ask them, if you don't know anything about it, how are you entitled to an opinion?
Good point. All right, so gold, silver to our viewers, opportunities now and in the foreseeable near future, gold, silver, and XRP. Jim, I know you've got to go, but give us 5 minutes. I'd like to introduce Bill Armour to you. Set up an introduction to my producer. We're going to bypass the promo. We don't have Benjamin Hart available. There's Bill Armour. Bill has built a unique career combining vocational ministry and expertise in the precious metals industry, equipping him to bridge faith-based perspectives with practical wisdom in stewardship and business. In conclusion, also, Bill, originally from Tucson, Arizona, Bill spent 8 years serving in the U.S. Army Reserves. Thereafter, he went on to attend Azusa Pacific University, a Christian school in Southern California, with a focus in Christian ministry and biblical studies. No stranger to the GFR. He's on every other week. Bill's a precious metals expert and a director at Genesis Gold, and my contact and source there. Welcome, Bill Armour. Say hello to Jim Willie.
Hey, Jim. How are you today?
I'm stressed out today.
Yeah, for good reason.
Like
We got a lot going on.
the last 100 months, I'm stressed out. I'm concerned about my heart, but that's another story.
Yeah. Well, we wish you
So
the best of good health. Bill,
do you sell, Bill? Do you sell gold and silver products like coins
We
and bars?
absolutely do. We absolutely do. Physical
Uh,
gold and silver. We absolutely do.
Do you sell the standard markings like Krugerrands and Eagles and Maple Leafs, or do you have some of your own brand?
Yeah, we sell all of the standards. We have an incredibly wide selection here. We're a very, very large dealer. So uh,
How,
not a one
how
size
about
fits everyone, but yeah, absolutely.
how about the special ones like the Pamps out of Switzerland? Do you get involved in?
Absolutely.
You do.
Absolutely.
Those are
Yes,
like
sir.
artworks. That's a cross between an investment in gold and an artwork. And I'm telling you, they are gorgeous.
They are
Um,
pretty.
have you encountered
Bill, do
much
you
fake
have?
gold?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you encountered any fake gold?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly outside, anything that comes from China, I particularly recommend people stay away from it. Just in general
Stay
for
away
their own
from China.
personal buying. We vet everything personally, but when people are dealing with outside other dealers, I've absolutely seen people come to us and say, "I purchased gold and silver. What's this worth?" And we go to take a look at it and evaluate it, and it turns out it's lead plated. So when you're working with a dealer, you want to make sure that it's one that is very, very reputable and does check the metal that they're selling, which obviously Genesis does.
Yeah, that's excellent. We see movies of 150 years ago biting that gold. It will leave a dent if it's really gold, and if it's like zinc,
Correct.
you won't be able to put a dent in it. It's not just zinc; it's tungsten. I've got information about the connection with Alberta and the tungsten mines and Papa Bush and the distribution of fake gold to Hong Kong and German banks. But anyway, I love Krugerrands. I tell my clients to stick with the major names: Silver Eagle, Canadian Maples, Krugerrands. You can't go wrong with them. But moving into prominence is the British Britannias and
Mhm.
the Austrian Philharmonics. They're both beautiful, but they're becoming now part of the standard selection, and I like that. It's good. It's good for the business. Do you see much with the Philharmonics and the Britannias?
Yeah, I mean they're gaining a lot of popularity. I think you have to always look at this in the sense of just looking through the history of what these metals have done. You always want a track record. So the track record on some of these other coins is maybe a little bit better, just in terms of long term, been around a little longer, been in favor a little bit longer. But you've also got bars. I mean, you've got a lot of different things. And anytime someone comes into metals, it can feel like a whole new world that they're stepping into. And that's why it always is important to have someone that can explain some of this, because you and I can talk about this like old friends, and it seems so commonplace. But people listening hear Krugerrand and Britannia and this and that, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? What's that? But that's part of it. It can be all so new, and we want to break down at Genesis. We want to break down all of these different facets so that when people get something, they know what they're getting, and frankly, that they like what they're getting and it fits what they want.
I heard a figure. It was right around when I started the newsletter, 2004-5. 1/3 of all the gold bars and coins were from South Africa. 1/3. That has vastly been reduced. I had a contact. I called him the Voice. He's now separated from me in a very unfortunate way. But he told me that there are a lot of bars that are from Russia, and a lot of high quality, Russia and China. I mean, like the kilogram bars, the big bars, the 10-kilogram bars. So,
Yep.
it is a global industry, and I expect something to emerge maybe in the next several months, and it'll be because of the BRICS. It'll be a multipolar gold pricing. Right now, we have a change of the guard where it's New York and London, and they're yielding to Shanghai. And
Right.
I have a client who gives me the delta. And for the longest time, Shanghai was like 80, 70, $110 higher than COMEX. And now they're almost equal. And I
Right.
reason, this is funny reasoning. I reason that if the delta is moving towards zero, it means that COMEX is out of the game. It means Shanghai's setting the price. There's no differential if there's no COMEX price. So COMEX quotes the Shanghai price.
Right.
That's very subtle logic. And I tell you, I do a lot of inferences here, Bill, and this is one of the most interesting markets. The dollar, gold, and silver, and global finance, and the Chinese don't want their currency to go up in value, but it's going up in value because they're becoming more legitimate and more gold in their backing and
Yes.
more confidence in their system. But they've got a horrendous problem. This is not related to gold, but the Chinese Evergrande has not been resolved. That's 3 years old now.
Huge problem.
And it's like
Huge
a
problem.
rotting corpse.
Yeah.
Rotting corpse. They've got no bankruptcy law there. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wish you luck.
Break that down. Before you go, Jim. Just give us 90 more seconds. Break that down with Bill a little bit, the Evergrande situation, so our viewers have a thorough understanding, because that was a big news blast a few years ago, and we haven't heard anything. Give us the analysis on that, and then we'll send you off.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim Willard. Go ahead, sir.
Just a quick overview, and Bill, you can add to this. You might know more than me. Evergrande was a conglomerate of banks, financial institutions like venture capital firms, investment firms. That's one side, the finance. Then Evergrande was involved with property development, and they've been accused of building some ghost cities.
Yep.
Ghost cities.
I've
Nobody's
seen
living in them.
those cities in China.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I lived in China for a while. I've seen those ghost cities on trains going traveling through the country. Humongous cities, completely empty. High-rise buildings.
Well, they must be
not a human being to be found.
They must be overtaken by spiders and monkeys. I don't understand that. All right, there's a third side to the Evergrande, and it's very murky. It has to do with insurance and Communist Party connections and liaisons with the CCP. Well, it's all rotting, and they cannot do a bankruptcy resolution and liquidation, because that would be an admission that the communist system is a failure.
Yep.
So it's rotting in place, a rotting corpse, and they haven't fixed it. And it's a lot worse now than it was 3 years ago when we first heard about it in October of 22. It's worse now, and it's never in the news.
Because if you
Oh my
don't
gosh.
if you don't handle a wound, it festers and it gets worse. And you're right. I mean, by comparison
Exactly.
to a lot of countries in the world, it seems like China's doing well, but they've got their own skeletons in their closet. You're exactly right. And
they've got a revolution.
You can take any number of these things with any number of countries that are on the brink of massive financial default, failure, etc. But we don't talk about it.
Their under 35 crowd is unemployed and in a revolt. And the Chinese military is doing a stand down. They're not shooting them. This is unique. We've never seen this in China. This is now a phenomenon that's been going on for the last year or so. There are people speaking up, like an entire factory got laid off, and 5,000 workers are without a job and they can't feed their families. So they take to the streets and they shove and push the Communist Party officials. They punch them in the face, and there's no official reaction with the military to enforce the law, to arrest them. There's nothing. There's a revolt that's happening in China right now, and it's not in the news. I got to tell you like a quick funny story before I go. I've got a number of Chinese clients, and in January and February of 2020, I had a number of them contact me at the same time. They're from Hong Kong. They're from Shanghai. They're from Australia. These are Chinese. They're from California. They're from Vancouver. And they all said the same thing. There were no deaths in Wuhan outside the city limits. It was not a virus. It was a 5G radiation kill. So what's the distinction of Wuhan? They're anti-communist party, and they were selected for the kill. They killed about 5 million people out of 12. None outside the city limits. You know, when you break a little kid's pool, swimming pool that's like 5 feet in diameter and 18 inches high, you break the pool, what happens to the water? It goes in all 360 directions. In a virus, it goes in all 360 directions. But this time, no deaths outside the city limits, and they had thousands of 5G. They were testing the radiation levels, and they were too high. In northern Italy, they were testing them also, and they were too high. Northern Italy. In Madrid, they were testing them, and they were too high. There's no coronavirus. That's a bunch of horse shit.
Right.
Anyway, I was all over this. I had a very big growth spurt during the lockdown because people wanted to know what on earth is going on. I think I helped save a lot of lives with the newsletter. I issued a special report that was about health, you know, the vaccine contents, the early, what do you call it? VAERS, adverse reaction database.
Oh, okay.
I talked about Fauci and his deadly experiments. I talked about gain of function. I talk about AED, and I can't remember what it is, but it's a remarkable phenomenon, kind of a reverse reaction by your immune system. Anyway, nice meeting you, Bill, and I wish you luck. We're kind of competitors because I support Gold Core. Gold Core is my company that they sell a lot of gold and silver coins and bars. They sell a lot. And it always surprises me. The demand is not going to quit. We got the U.S. Mint. They're not fulfilling their charter. They're breaking the law. There are a lot of dealers that have no coins at all. They want an economic depression so the people don't have money to buy. The retail demand is low because we're stuck in an economic depression. Donald Trump calls it a strong economy, but I think he's a fool. I mean, I like Donald Trump for a lot of things, John, don't get me wrong. But anyone who relies on the stock market as a measure and trade tariffs for income and calls that economic activity an indicator of it is a fool.
Well, President Trump doesn't need me to defend his position on your comments. And I respect your views, Jim. But the president, in my opinion, is 3 feet behind the head of pretty much every human being on the planet. And I think that the challenges that you've raised are certainly there, real and formidable. But I believe that there is a plan, and we're going to plow through all that. I think the system may collapse, and maybe it should collapse. And I also say that some of the things, and you would know better than me, some of the problems that you've commented on that the president is dealing with right now, some of these things were from the auto pen administration that he is now having to deal with. And I just,
I
But
agree, but
listen,
get back to me when the Japanese have foreign direct investment in the United States, and when the Saudis have foreign direct investment in the United States. I'm still looking for that foreign direct investment in the United States for the economy. They're calling it the not the outsourcing, but the resourcing. bringing back industry to the United States. I'm still waiting for it. So where's SoftBank?
Yeah.
Have they broken ground anywhere? It's been 8 months. Have they broken ground anywhere? No, zero, zero, zero. Tariffs have interfered with foreign direct investment. Yeah, right.
Understood. You're raising very important.
You're
raising very important and critical.
Get back to me when Toyota has that joint venture with the big three. Get back to me on that.
All right.
Well, listen. I'm an obstinate son of a gun, and I wait for the data. I don't wait for words from a president who believes the stock market is an indicator of economic activity. That's moronic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for
nice
being
to meet
here,
you,
Jim.
Bill.
I like to.
Pleasure.
Hold on. I'd like to
John.
have you back. Jim, before you sign off, what's the best place for people to follow you and your work?
golden-jackass.com. You know, when I started the newsletter, I had no idea that it would become so successful. So I gave it kind of a cheeky name of Golden Jackass. My mother used to call me my little jackass. My little jackass. Okay, so I was, this cute little blue-eyed blonde kid who would annoy the heck out of my mother. And even when I was 13 years old, she called me my little jackass. So she actually, when I named my website, she said, Jim, I wet myself. Okay, I have a lot of fun at this. My mother and father are both gone.
Sure
my mother in 2007, my father in 2020. But golden-jackass.com, I'm in my 22nd year. I've got a large base, and it is 74 countries, but it's 75% United States, 13% Canada, and the rest is spread all over the place. I just had one client come from Qatar, and I looked it up. Oh gosh, that's the second one from Qatar. Okay, it's a lot of people. I've got a consult button. I've got time, 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks a month. I have a lot of time for consult calls. I've got a donate button because let's face it, we got a new phenomenon in the last 5 years. People don't like to read as much as watch a video. They can watch a video while they're lying down. A lot of the people are stressed out. So, and I'm pretty much the same. I read as much as I can, but I catch videos. So if you don't like a newsletter and don't want to pay for a newsletter, make donations. Hit the donate button. So I got consult, I got the subscription for the newsletter, I got the donate, and I got something also. I like to accommodate the very wealthy. If you're really wealthy and you want to support my work, hit the sponsor button and make a very large contribution. And I give you permission to do it on a regular basis. And I've got a couple of people who do. And one of them owns a gold mine.
Wealthy.
Accommodate the wealthy. And remember, I'm unencumbered by the limitations of economics credentials, which means I'm not a stupid ass Harvard PhD in economics who don't know shit about debt. I've argued, I've debated. Cornell and Harvard PhDs, they don't know shit. John, they don't know shit about debt.
It's better to be a jackass than a stupid ass, and we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Jim Willie, for joining us today. Energetic, inspiring, and controversial, but good analysis in the main and good commentary and opinion. Thank you, sir. I do want to have you back in the future. So thank Jim Willie for joining us. Bill, thanks for sticking around. We had Benjamin Hart, attorney, U.S. attorney, practicing law, integrity legal in Bangkok. I've worked with him as a client, and unfortunately he had tech issues and couldn't log on this week. But we'll have him on next week, and perhaps you can chat with Benjamin as well, because you brought up the narrative last time you and I were on the GFR talking about, you raised the issue of the 86 million in Vietnam whose bank accounts were closed. I understand there's been about 3 million accounts here in Thailand that have been closed, but for different reasons in Vietnam, as I understand. That's what Benjamin would have commented on. But anyway, we've got some time left, and thanks for being here, Bill. Any comments or feedback what you just heard from in the last hour or so from listening to Jim Willie?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to actually take a step back and summarize a couple things he said, and then, kind of because obviously I understand he talks at a high level, and sometimes I'm sure that can go over people's head. So he talked about a lot of economic activity that's not looking good right now. You've got the jobs reports, you've got the commercial real estate, you've got residential real estate, you've got. I mean, we could point to it's almost a who's of what's wrong with this economy. I'm a little more in your camp, obviously, that I would blame the Autopen administration there for what we're seeing right now, and this is the lag from that because a lot of this data it doesn't reflect immediately, right? Policy, you don't see that change overnight for the most part. Generally there's a lag there, so we're experiencing really things were bad at the end of Biden's term, but again, that's you don't stop a car on a dime, right? It takes time, so we're still stopping, going in the wrong direction here. So where we find ourselves, not a great position economically. But I also want to point one of the challenges out that he touched on that is hard for us to turn that boat around, so to speak. And that is, he talked about the Fed, right? So the Fed controls, monetary policy as a rule of thumb. And he pointed to Wall Street owning a significant portion of the Fed. So obviously Wall Street, and we can go deeper into that. I would suggest, banking cabal as a whole, is all kind of tied together in one batch there. But one of the points he made, and he mentioned this briefly, but maybe didn't explain it, to the length I would explain it for people, is a term quantitative easing. And if that sounds complicated, I'll make it very, very simple. What it is the Fed comes out and says, you know what, the economy doesn't look great. And because a lot of people do look at the stock market as a barometer of economic activity, I think when Trump talks about, where we're going, I think he's talking about where we're going, not necessarily where we're at, that the economy is growing, that we're turning the ship around, not that, that's the best economy ever in the history, but that we can get there, and that, probably the car has to crash first. But one of the problems that the previous administration has left us in terms of the Fed is this quantitative easing bubble they've created. And quantitative easing, to explain that, is when the Fed takes money and they go out and they basically purchase stocks, bonds, et cetera, there under basically the government's bankroll. So they're creating money out of thin air to buy things. Well, that creates artificial demand. I mean, for instance, imagine if I had a bunch of marbles and no one around me wanted to buy the marbles. And then all of a sudden I said, you know what, I'm going to make this fake money and I'm going to pay myself for these marbles. And then I told people, look, this other guy paid for these marbles. People want these marbles. He said, okay, well, I guess if he's buying them, I'll buy them too. But they don't know that I just wrote that money out of thin air and bought them myself. So that is a game that they've been playing over and over to drive the market up. And the problem is that at some point we have to acknowledge one of two things. Either we just continue this facade forever and the market goes up and your dollar gets weaker and weaker and weaker, or at some point there is a liquidity crisis where they pull that quantitative easing money out, and that's where you would see basically mass selling of different asset classes, and you would see huge drops because there's a bunch of money leaving those. Other people would follow suit and you see a big crash. So all of that to say, people look at this and they say, oh, the market's still going up. Well, Trump doesn't control monetary policy right now. That's half of the arm wrestling he's doing with Jerome Powell is to try and wrestle some of that power back to the American people away from the banking cabal. So when we look at this and you say, man, well, the market's going up, it's going up for now until they can't keep playing that game, until Wall Street can't keep playing that game, or until the cards, house of cards falls down. So the question is, and this is really we could talk more about this, but a prelude to why gold is moving so aggressively is because gold is the ultimate financial bloodhound. It sniffs out a problem faster than you can blink. And so when gold is going higher, it should set off alarm bells in your head to say, what is really going on with this economy? Why is gold going higher? And that is one of the major reasons that doesn't get talked about enough. So I'm really glad he brought that up, is this idea that we've got fake money going into the system and gold says, I can tell that's not real.
Great points. And you talked about quantitative easing and you defined it really well. And the simple analogy of the marbles makes all the sense in the world. It sounds to me like debt QE and other things that the Fed does, they've kicked that can down the proverbial road, and we are pretty much out of road. And I say, let the whole thing crash and burn. Let's flush it out. Let's clean it out. Let's start anew. And I think that is, in fact, where we are heading. You just started touching on something which dovetails into the next thing I wanted to talk with you about. Here we are today, and I'm sure it was a celebratory moment in your firm. It was here in my home. Gold reaching a new all-time high of over $4,000 an ounce, and silver now kissing its all-time high of $50 an ounce. You touched on what is contributing and how gold is a barometer. Elaborate a little bit more in high and level and simple level terms on what is causing the rise of gold and silver so significantly. And again, it's not just a one-hit wonder, folks. 1 year, 5 year, 10, 20 year, you can run the numbers. We've seen the numbers. Gold and silver are among the number one asset class in the world, not just short term right now, but long term. But my question to you, Bill, is what are some of the things that are causing both gold and silver to go up at the rates that we see it going up? How long in your crystal ball do you anticipate before it tops out? And over what time period? And lastly, and I'll repeat these questions if you need it, where will the top be on gold and silver? So what's contributing to it? How long will this go on? Where and when will it top out, and at what levels?
Yeah, great question. So first, to explain what's causing this, obviously quantitative easing is one piece, and one piece that we don't often talk about. You've also got, and Jim referenced this as well, the debt explosion. You're adding $1 trillion every 100 days to the national debt. So that's a runaway train. It's a runaway freight train. It's a debt bomb. You've got central banks buying gold at record numbers. He alluded to the different amounts that other countries have. Absolutely. And when that supply is being hoarded by a couple central banks, suddenly people that say, you know what, that, just the average retail investor say, I want to go ahead and grab some gold. If no one's selling that gold, you're going to pay more, and you're going to pay more, and you're going to pay more until someone says, you know what, okay, fine, I'll let it go for 4,100, 4,200, whatever that might be. So there's less gold that's actually really available to buy right now. So central bank demand, central banks are adding, the three major ones would be the United States, Russia, and China, each of which has added 1,000 tons of gold consecutively each year for the last 3 years. So that's 9,000 tons of gold that's now off the market. You can't touch it. No, they're not giving that away. You've got the currency weakness, obviously, which ties into the dollar and the debt, but we're down about 15% from summer. So that's the strength of your dollar. You don't really hear this talked about on the news either. It's not, but you can look at DXY. It's a chart you can pull right up, and you can look at it and you can watch. You can say, oh my gosh, why is this not front page news that the dollar is collapsing in real time? The answer, honestly, I think that there's still some people that aren't quite ready for that to happen, and they don't want to create a mass panic, because if people really looked at the numbers and saw some of the numbers that I look at, you'd be having the same conversations I have with my wife, which is, what have we done? Obviously, we've already prepared, but friends and family, you got to get something done, and sooner rather than later, because the numbers are non-negotiable. We can have our opinions about how it happens and the exact timing, but the numbers are non-negotiable. It's coming. And another one I'll just add here is rate cuts. Regardless, people talk about as rates have been gone up a little bit, they were low for so long, but gold loves rate cuts. Historically, the last few times we've cut rates, we've seen gold rise about 15%. So there's some anticipation there that as soon as we get those rate cuts, gold goes up again. And then I'll tail end here with just increased buying. We've got a projection here that $12 trillion with the Trump making available 401ks to purchase gold here. That's current 401ks. And there's a little technicality to that, but frankly, $12 trillion that's available to buy gold. That's just adds to that's gasoline on the fire that is gold movement right now. So all of those to say, you ask, where do we see gold going? What's the expectation and whatnot? Well, it's always a tough answer, and I'll give you a reason for that. Because if you were to say we're in Germany 1922, and you say, Bill, what's the price of bread going to? And I could say, well, it's going up, because at that point, a loaf of bread was about 160 marks. By the end of that year, it was 20 billion marks. So the bread was the same bread, right? But the dollar had collapsed at that point so when we say what could gold go to, in a sort of fantastical sense, a billion, 20 billion, because the dollar really that's what we're comparing it to, right? As the dollar goes and is worth less until it's worthless, that's that comparison. But assuming we don't have a complete currency collapse here, most people were looking at the end of this year.
In my opinion, we won't have a complete dollar collapse, but it'll suffer. Weigh in on that statement real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, and then please continue. What do you think? Do you think? I don't believe the dollar is going to collapse. I think we're going to continue on a trajectory down for reasons stated in this program and others. But President Trump is not going to permit that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of just giving perspective in terms of I always like to be fair and present different arguments and then let people make. I think people are pretty smart; they can make their own decisions. So I like to lay out what people are saying. It's the same approach I take when people get medals. I don't just say, hey, you're getting this or this or this and be dogmatic about it. I say every single person is different. What they want, their goals are going to be different. And I want to make sure that we're facilitating that. So really just to that, but I would agree with you that I think this is, we're going down, but I do, and we're in agreement and alignment on this, that I think we get out of this. The question is, how do you, obviously this is the focus of this show, is how do you not just survive this, but thrive through this? And so, gold obviously being a really productive way to do that. I think about people that have done this, in the last few months and are up, 20, 30%. And that's thriving. That's right. I mean, 20, 30% here. And it's not just that you're up. People always think, oh, I'm up. That's great. That's only half of it. The other half is that you're not worrying about, you have the peace of mind. And I in some ways, you can't put a price on that peace of mind to know that you are hedged from the inevitable. I mean, let's say the Fed comes out and they really want to oppose Trump and they really want to create sort of chaos, across the country. So they rip all that QE out. People look at their 401ks and they're down dramatically, and their portfolios, and they say, "Oh my gosh!" and that creates panic. I mean, these are all tools of the enemy that I would point out. That and again, not saying that any particular one of them happens, but absolutely, these are things we should be thinking about and preparing for.
Okay, so assuming we don't end up in a Weimar Republic situation where gold could be worth $1 billion an ounce. More realistically, as Trump rescues the dollar ultimately in this battle that we're dealing with, from your analysis, you've got you said gold loves rate cuts. Well, we're in a rate cut environment, too little, too late, but that trajectory will continue, in my opinion, and the other reasons you've stated. So both gold and silver are going to continue to grow under the agreement that we'll have here in this discussion that it doesn't completely collapse. Where do you see potentially gold in the next 3 years and silver in the next 3 years?
Absolutely. So Citibank talks about, some recent projections that they're looking at gold at about 6,000 over the next few years. I would tend to be in that camp, assuming, and that's really assuming, again, nothing cataclysmic and not even just a complete dollar collapse, but I'm talking about any sort of wars, any of the real big things that occur, the BRICS nations getting together and finally really formalizing and pushing that. So there's a lot of things that could make that a lot higher, but I would say the conservative estimate out of Citibank at about 6,000 over the next couple of years would be a very reasonable return, which is, trust me, it's still 50% in 2 to 3 years. So I don't think anyone's complaining about that. Now, silver is a little more interesting because if you just look at, and I've talked about this before, and I'll continue to hammer this point home, I look at silver in the historical mean of how it behaves in relation to gold. So how many ounces of silver should equate to 1 ounce of gold? And historically, that's around 35 to 1. Depending on the time period, you look at it, could be a little higher, a little lower, but about 35 to 1. So right now, obviously gold at 4,000, silver at about just about to crest 50 there. So still, that's about 80. So a pretty big gap there. And if gold is about 6,000 and we kind of work that logic backwards to say, okay, well, where does silver go in relation to that? So that puts silver, 150 plus to start to get to those ratios. So I look at that and I don't think that that's, really much of a statement at all in the 150 to 200 range. Again, if we look historically and we continue the expectations on gold. So I would say, silver 150 to 200 in the next few years, gold 6,000 would be fair assessments.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Bill. I want to have you briefly comment on platinum and palladium. We don't hear too much about those metals, and we hear so much about gold and silver, both gold and silver being a financial metal, and of course, silver being an industrial metal as well. Where has platinum and palladium been during this incredible run up in gold and silver, and why are we not speaking too much about that these days?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I need to provide a little bit of context for this to make sense. So platinum and palladium don't have, of course, historically the financial, sort of side to them. Gold is always thought of currency, silver as well. So they don't have that. So what are they really? Well, they're more industrial metals. They have a purpose. So you look at platinum and palladium. both used in industry and in fairly niche markets there. So for a long time, they were using platinum for a lot of this automotive stuff. And then all of a sudden, platinum started. This is going back about up until about 2012, 2014. And they'd been using platinum. And then all of a sudden, platinum started to get a little expensive, $1,400, $1,500. And so most automakers shifted to palladium. So they said, we're going to use palladium instead. And that's where you got this monstrous run on palladium, where palladium went from 700 to 3,500. I mean, it's a 500% return in just a few years. And then all of a sudden, because palladium had gotten so expensive, those same automakers, again, they're fairly niche markets. People said, we want to mine more palladium because it's so cost effective, it's worth so much. And B, those same automakers said, hey, it's really expensive to buy palladium, so we're going to go back to using platinum. So then you had this huge crash in palladium, where palladium goes back to nowadays it's 1,300 hovers in there. Both of them, just for clarification, are up 60 and 80% respectively this year. So they're both, doing tremendously well, which is a reflection of, again, the inflation, et cetera, the weakness in the dollar. But the reason we don't talk about them in the same way is because of the volatility in those two metals. So generally, when we talk to people about investing in precious metals, they're looking for something that will give them kind of stability, and that has historically not been palladium or platinum. Not to say that people can't. Actually, we offer platinum and palladium. We definitely talk to people about that, but just to say that those are outliers in a portfolio, not what you build your home on.
That makes all the sense in the world. Thanks for clarifying that for me and our viewers. One or two more questions, Bill, before we close out. Share with us, you do a lot of free consultations. You speak with a lot of, as you say, retail investors, basically us folks listening to the program. Any investor experiences, either good and or bad, that you would care to share with us that you experience in the field, doing the kind of work you do on a daily basis, that perhaps those experiences, both good or bad, would be of benefit to the audience to hear about? Anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one that I deal with, maybe I'll give you one good, one bad. One that I deal with maybe all the time, almost every day, especially recently, is the people, the phone calls, the thank you letters, et cetera, because for a lot of people, this is a big change. Most people have done the dog and pony show of stocks, et cetera, their entire life, and all of a sudden they make a big change. And there's a lot to that. People say, I don't know, this is a new world to me. And so I get a lot of thank you cards for the help that I provide for people in the way that I provide it. And I hope that comes across to people that are listening, that this is not the kind of thing where used car salesman or anything, which I hate to say it, but is very common in any sort of financial industry. But frankly, I take a much different approach. I like to look at people and figure out who they are and what their goals are and whatnot, and we look at and try to figure out a way to make this fit them. And I give them all the information and help people make decisions that they want to make, as opposed to ones that someone else is telling them to make. Because the best investor is going to be one that makes their own decisions and is informed. So I would just say the gratification for me is people saying, I made this change, and I'm getting a lot of calls saying, hey, Bill, it worked. We're even just people that made that switch off of just end of August when we had our first chat together, our first show that I was on with you, and people that are coming from that, and their portfolios are just up massively. So that's a huge that's a point of pride for me that I look at, and being able to help people with this transition. So I would say that on the good side. On the not so good side is the amount of people, especially with gold cresting 4,000, that are looking and saying, oh, well, now I've just missed it. I'm too late. I get that all the time. I'm too late. I'm too late. I'm too late. And the one thing is, I've done this long enough, I've started to learn, is that the same people that said they were late at 2,000 said they were late at 2,200 and said they were late at 2,500, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're the same people that tell me they're too late at 4,000. And the advice I give people on that is that when you talk, in the current climate we're in, and this is not all the time, this is a unique situation. We're not always, in the middle of trying to survive, financial calamity. But in the current situation we're in, it's just a matter of which train you get on. But the trains come every 10 minutes. So if you've missed one train, if you were sitting at the train station, you missed a train, you wouldn't lose your mind and think, oh, I've missed the train, I'll never get on. You would just know that, okay, well, the next train, I'm going to be 10 minutes later to my appointment, but I'm going to make my appointment. And so that's really also what I put on to people is, look, you're only a little bit later than you were yesterday and a little bit later than you were the day before, but you're still early in a lot of ways.
Sure. And as you cited Citigroup and your own analysis, gold can easily go to 6,000 conservatively speaking over the next couple of short years. And silver, you said 150. That's a huge leap from where it sits today at just about 50. So to that analysis and to that point in commentary, it's not too late, folks. Last question, Bill. When a viewer from this program, you touched on it, but let's break it down a bit. When a viewer watching the GFR here reaches out to you for a free consult, and by the way, folks, you can do that by visiting jmcgenesismetals.com. You can simply call the phone number. What is your phone number, Bill? I don't even have it on the screen or know what it is.
Andy, 1-800-200-GOLD.
Thank you. Yeah, so those are the two ways you can reach out. But when people do reach out, this free consultation to get their questions answered, get some further education, walk us through what the experience is like when somebody reaches out to you from this broadcast. What are the sort of sequential steps would they go through should they end up acquiring gold or silver inside or outside of the IRA? Walk us through that, if you will, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step is obviously we connect. You'd reach out, whether that's a phone call or submitting online for an appointment, whatever that might look like. And at some point, either we'll connect via email or preferably over the phone, so we can chat. And we'll go through your situation. We'll figure out, first off, how are you set up? Because everyone's different. And, the options for you might not be available for someone else and vice versa. So first, we're going to kind of diagnose your situation and figure out how we can go about getting you gold and silver. And if it even makes sense for you. I mean, you may not be able to. Some people think, I'm not sure, but they look into it and they can't. And a lot of people come in and they say, I'm not sure I can. And they end up being able to. So you never know. And it's a minefield out there. I've had so many clients that tell me, well, my provider told me I can't do anything. And I say, that doesn't make sense with what I understand. And we call over, and sure enough, their provider says, oh, well, actually you can now, you weren't able at this time, or some rule has changed. So all sorts of reasons here that every person's situation is constantly changed. So first step, we identify your situation, ways that we can help and how we might make that happen. Two main ways people acquire metals. That's via qualified funds, that's retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. There's a number of different types of accounts there, and non-qualified funds. That's money in a checking account. That's money in a brokerage. Could be a lot of different places. But we figure out where it's coming from. And then from there, we'll walk you through. If it's qualified funds, we'll help you set up. That's IRAs, et cetera. We'll help you set up that type of account that allows you to own physical gold and silver. So you're not getting paper gold and silver like a lot of brokers will tell you or try to convince you into. You're going to get real physical gold and silver. We'll help you set you up with an account with that. We white glove service the whole way. Me and my team have an asset transfer team that does tremendous work. I mean, they get more compliments than I do, just because they're holding people's hands with all these documents and whatnot. And it can be confusing, but they do great work. So we get the account set up, funds rolled over, and then from there we have that metals conversation. We're figuring out, who are you? What, gold, silver, coins, bars, what size denominations? Many of my clients prefer smaller denominations because they want something that would be barterable in any sort of situation. So everyone's different. And that's what we go through. We get a portfolio put together. We get your metals into a storage facility that's insured, safe. Really, we just go step by step. So you speak with me, and I'm really going to work with you individually to figure out how we can make this happen and what's going to be the best fit.
Excellent. And once that process is done, and it is very cumbersome, I know from experience, those that have to transfer IRAs and assets, I tell our audience, don't do that on your own. If you make a mistake, the IRS is very unforgiving. So the asset transfer part is critical. But once all that's done and set up, and the client is happy and getting to watch gold and silver grow as well as their portfolio value, what happens then? What's the relationship moving forward with you, your firm, and your client?
Well, they're going to have my direct line, and that's not, a number for the main line of the company or anything like that. That is my direct line that every person has. And John, you know that I respond to email at all sorts of times and whatnot, as I know you do. It's just the way that we're wired. But I take that very seriously because, think about it. We're talking about people's life savings. They want to make sure that they're getting the attention they deserve. So get access to me, and then we're going to connect at least, but sometimes more, once a quarter to make sure that you understand what you've got, what it's doing, where it's going, and really just get to know, again, if there's anything coming up. I have people all the time that say, hey, Bill, I think I'm going to be looking for, a little bit of a liquidation here at some point. I want to move some back into dollars. I just had one client who's fixing to help pay for his daughter's wedding. So it gave me a little bit of heads up. We were able to, obviously, we were able to get a great exit point with him, and he's very, very pleased. But that's the kind of relationship. It's not a set it and forget it in the same way that some gold brokers do, where you buy metals and then you try to get them on the phone a year later, and you can't find their number and they don't want to talk to you and this and that. It's so different from that, and I'm so thrilled to be at a company that respects that and is on board with that.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that I work with you and your company. And also, our time is up, but I want to just close out with this. You just commented on an exit strategy for a client to finance a wedding. There's limitless times that people want to liquidate, or there's times that you'll be recommending a swap from silver to gold or to start paring down. But certainly this is the time to start pairing up. This is the time to continue to invest in gold and silver. But I also know, and another reason I'm working with your firm is you're one of the very few firms that does not charge a commission on the exit strategy. Folks, I can't tell you how important that is. If you put $100,000 into gold and silver and it's grown over the years to $300,000, why do you want to pay a commission when you sell it back on the $300,000? The answer is you don't. So reach out to Bill, jmcgenesismetals.com. Bill, thanks for joining us. Come back and see us a week after next. There's so many angles that we can approach on this. And to our viewers, if you have specific questions that you would like addressed to both Bill and I, namely to Bill, about gold and silver, email me, john@jmcbroadcasting.com. It's a dedicated email to the public. I can't answer all emails, but I do my very best, and I open up that email every weekend, that account, and answer your questions. Any specific questions that you have about this issue, and you want to talk to me before you get to Bill, do that. You can also visit wealthcoachuniversity.com, where I personally invested over 100 hours of my time and put together video PowerPoint modules on GOOTS, how to get out of the system. That is at wealthcoachuniversity.com. I'm available for you for an overall consult, or if you just want to get right to the man himself, go to genesismetals.com, or give Bill a call at the phone number we've provided. Bill, thanks a lot. Any closing comments as we sign you off till next episode?
Gold's at 4,000. It's a good day.
You bet. No question about it. I was on with a wealth coach client the other day who's working with your firm now, and we, while on the call, we were discussing the price point of gold and silver, because we were putting a sort of an income strategy together, and I went online and looked, and that was my first recollection that gold at the time was 4,024. So yeah, it's a glorious day. It's a great day, and thank you very much, Bill. Genesis Gold Capital. Thanks a lot, Bill. And we'll see you next time. I want to bring my advisor's scorecard up on the screen to my producer, if we can do that. I close out with this pretty much every broadcast because I want to drive it home. The advisor scorecard can be found at wealthcoachuniversity.com. And basically what it says, and you can read this yourself online, it's readable, it's downloadable, and it's very simple. Bill alluded to just a moment ago, one of the obstacles that people encounter when they've made a firm decision, that they don't want to work with woke firms. They want to work with firms that understand the pulse of reality today. And that's pretty much what I focus on. So here's 10 quick things, folks, on the advisor scorecard. Now, somewhere on that screen to our producer, you might see advisor scorecard. You can click on it and open it up. I don't know if you have to scroll up or down, but here's what it says essentially. Does your financial advisor have the same ideology and political view as you? There it is. If you just click on that PDF, that blue button, that should pop it up. There you go. You can go full screen with it so our viewers can look at it if you choose to. But here's what it says, folks, and it's very important because it's an unnecessary obstacle. We do everything we can to empower you with knowledge, education, variety of different guests. Sometimes our guests have different views, as you can see, but all good information to help you get out of the system. So how do we overcome the financial advisor, the Wall Street block? Does your financial advisor have the same ideology and political view as you? That's an important question to ask of your advisor. That's a good place to start. Does your advisor, pardon me, folks, I'm having difficulty getting this thing read over the phone here, over the broadcast. Does your financial advisor understand and follow fiscal, monetary, and changing policy? Is your financial advisor in good standing with the regulatory bodies? Gold and silver, the best performing asset class in the world today. Have they discussed acquiring physical, tangible gold and silver over these years and presently to combat inflation? And if so, why not? I know the answer, but you need to find these things out. Is your financial advisor firm woke? Is your advisor aware of the parallel economies that we're dealing with here in this global financial reset? I'm not going to continue to read this to you because you can actually download it yourself, read it yourself at wealthcoachuniversity.com. What I'm going to do right now is ask my producer to go to our promotional break. I'm going to close out with some very important information, and then we'll wrap up our program. I want to thank you all for being here, and I'll be right back.
Your hard-earned assets are under attack and may be in harm's way. Many people are confused, thus concerned about what is going on with the currency, the markets, and the economy. A great change is underway. With the private wealth coach consult, of which John Michael Chambers discusses in greater detail in Module 10 of the Wealth Coach University, you can break through procrastination as you become informed, empowered, and connected. JMC has created a system whereby you can avail yourself to a team of like-minded professionals to help you navigate this unprecedented minefield and meet privately with John Michael Chambers. The Wealth Coach University was launched based upon years of experience as a successful former financial advisor to help you, Goots, get out of the system.
Hello, this is John Michael Chambers. I retired after nearly 15 years as an independent financial advisor in 2008 to heed a higher calling. My biography can be accessed by visiting wealthcoachuniversity.com. I know what goes on behind the scenes in the world of Wall Street and investments, as well as having my finger on the pulse of the global financial reset of which we are presently engaged. Let's discuss the Wealth Coach Consult. I am not a financial advisor, and I do not give specific financial advice, nor can I assist you in the repositioning of your assets. I will, however, provide answers to your questions to the best of my ability and provide a high-level analysis of you and your situation. At the conclusion of our consult, if one is prepared to take the next step and begin repositioning assets to GOOTS, G-O-O-T-S, get out of the system, I will make available to you the appropriate individuals in my resource network. In the financial world, these are licensed, seasoned, patriot professionals that can assist in this area and to help you get from where you are to where you need to be as soon as possible, both confidentially and with confidence. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com. By doing so, you gain access to the 10 free educational video PowerPoint modules. Then schedule your Wealth Coach consult with me today. I do look forward to speaking with you. It's time. All right, thanks for sticking around here at the GFR Live on the various different platforms. I'm John Michael Chambers, jmcbroadcasting.com. Joining me next week on the GFR Live is returning guest, our good friend Josh Reed, and we're going to delve into the same subjects, but he's going to focus on the crypto world from top to bottom for those that are interested in learning more about that. To my producer, let's talk about Eyes on Gitmo. Here we go. Eyes on Gitmo is a new show we did the premiere show a week or so ago with Juan O'Savin, retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, retired Marine, 20 years. You want to watch that broadcast, and it'll be a monthly. Pardon me. Next month, we're going to really start defining Gitmo, the two different 24/7 rooms that tribunals are being processed, the media center that's been set up, getting ready to broadcast and report from Gitmo, and so many other related things with an incredibly esteemed panel of experts. Switching gears to the global defense war. This is also another program that I produce. It's a monthly. I think we've got 6-7 months under our belt. You need to join in each and every month of the Global Defense War Panel with Lieutenant Colonel Chuck Sellers, Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi, Navy SEAL, CIA retired Michael Jaco, and Derek Johnson, and Canadian military fighter Brad Wasney. Derek Johnson, veteran of the Army. So anyway, these are very powerful and important subjects. While we don't necessarily delve into the financial world extensively in there, we do touch on it because it's part of the war that we are engaged in. So Wealth Coach University, if you'd like a private Wealth Coach consult with me, visit wealthcoachuniversity.com, and you can email me again directly, john@jmcbroadcasting.com. Look forward to speaking with you. I can only do 8 consults a month due to the time zone difference and the demand on my schedule. But this is, as we wrap up the dawning of the golden age, this is John Michael Chambers speaking with his voice. Do speak with your voice. Please stay safe, and may God be with you.
Join Juan O'Savin, retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and other prominent military and intelligence guests for an ongoing monthly broadcast with John Michael Chambers as your host here on jmcbroadcasting.com. The premiere episode launches Friday, September 26, 2025, and is sponsored by Genesis Gold. Visit jmcgenesismetals.com. This panel will address, among other subjects of great importance, what's taking place with the military tribunals, sealed and unsealed indictments, and the avalanche of arrests to come. Will justice be served? This and much more will be addressed each month, including an analysis of current events, making sense of the events as they unfold, one psyop after another. Detecting truth from lies in the dying age of fake news and the rising age of AI and digital enhancements will help you to remain focused and grounded in these most challenging, difficult, and dangerous final battles. A new day is dawning as this golden age is at the doorstep. Remain informed, empowered, and connected by an elite team of military and intelligence experts, and together we will save America. Subscribe for free at jmcbroadcasting.com and be sure to join us monthly. Eyes on Gitmo, wartime analysis. Nothing can stop what's coming, and the best is yet to come. Where we go one, we go all here at jmcbroadcasting.com.